Hi, my name is Ili Ma, and this video is for the study on information sampling for contingency planning. It's a collaboration study with NYU professors Ili Ma and Todd Gorekis. So people often plan in their daily lives, and this ranges from long-term plans such as career planning to short-term plans like navigating from one location to another or making a to-do list for next week. When we think of this type of planning in daily life, it becomes quite clear that information sampling is actually very useful for planning. So information can save us from committing to plans that are actually not feasible or are too costly. And navigating is actually a very clear example, where, for example, a long traffic jam could be very time consuming. So you might decide to gather information about the traffic situation first before you pick a route. And if you do find out that there's a traffic jam, then you might consider alternative means of transportation like taking a subway. And this type of information sampling would require thinking ahead about your future states. But interestingly, most empirical findings actually suggest that people don't consider a longer time horizon when they sample information. And we hypothesize that people do think about their future states and that they use information sampling to avoid switching to a costly contingency plan. And where here a contingency plan is an alternative plan that would be considered in case the original plan is not feasible or would be too costly. So our task was inspired by a computational science problem of planning under uncertainty, which is called the Canadian Traveler problem. There the task is to reach a goal while minimizing your travel distance, and a roadmap is shown, but parts of the road might be blocked and therefore untraversable. Encountering a roadblock means that you have to replan your route. And this paradigm was later also extended to include information sampling, where the status of the road can be sampled before committing to a route. So in the current study, we took inspiration from this problem to examine information sampling for the purpose of planning. And this is what the task looked like to our participants. They were asked to navigate their sheep avatar to the flag in as few actions as possible. They saw the map with the bridges, they saw their sheep avatar's position, and they saw the flag. The status of all these bridges were unknown at the start of the puzzle. The tour status of a bridge is either open or closed, and this is revealed when the participants either sample a bridge or when they try to navigate their sheep across the bridge. The task consisted of two stages. In stage 1, participants could only sample the status of bridges, and they could do so for up to 10 bridges, anywhere in the puzzle. They could also stop sampling sooner by clicking on the Stop Checking button on the left. After they stopped sampling, or once they reached a maximum of 10 sampled bridges, they would enter stage 2. And in stage 2, they had to get the sheep to the flag by moving it across the bridges, so they couldn't sample anymore, they could only move their sheep avatar. Both sampling and moving the sheep incurs a fixed cost, so both actions should be minimized in order to get a higher reward. The probability of a bridge closure was 0.2, and participants were informed of this, and they also gained experience with this during practice trials. This is a video of participants playing the task. So here the green bridges are traversable and the red ones are not. This person fairly quickly decides to stop sampling. And now they have entered stage 2 and they're trying to move their sheep across these bridges towards the flag. And this video is interesting because what happens here is that it also shows how valuable it is to sample information, because this person now has to take a fairly long detour, which is costly, to reach the flag, and it's not even clear if the flag can be reached at all.
Hooray!
So once they finished the puzzle, they moved on to a new puzzle, which was a completely different roadmap. We collected this data on Amazon mTurk, and the task was programmed in C# and a Unity game engine. In total, we had 109 participants. The task started with a short tutorial in which they received instructions and practice puzzles. They then received 5 comprehension questions, and they had to respond correctly to all of those 5 questions before they were able to continue to the main task. The main task consisted of 85 puzzles. We also wanted to know if the information sampling choices on our task actually correlated with planning in real life. So we therefore also asked our participants to fill out 2 short questionnaires which measured planning and impulsive choices in daily life. We developed a computational model of information sampling for contingency planning. The intuition for this model is that people may think about the possible paths that they could choose from in stage 2 when they can only move the sheep avatar. For each bridge on the path that they consider, they might consider how long the detour would be if that bridge were closed. And the longer the detour it would cause, the higher the value of sampling that bridge would be. So let's take a look at the model in more detail. This green path is an example of a path to the goal which might be considered. It's 5 bridges long, and the status of each of these bridges is unknown. Of course, this is only an example of one path, but the model would consider all the paths that don't involve unnecessarily walking back and forth. So this image depicts other paths that the model would consider too. But we will continue with the green path as an example. In this example state, no bridge has yet been sampled, so all of these have the status unknown. But imagine a situation where some bridges are known to be open, and then people might actually show uncertainty aversion by having a preference for a path with more open bridges compared to a path that is just as long but has more bridges of unknown status. So to account for this, we weight the bridges of unknown status with an uncertainty aversion parameter. The open and the weighted unknown bridges on a path are then summed to obtain what we call the effective length of a path. The value of a path is then given by its negative effective length, because the agents should try to minimize the travel distance. The probability of choosing a path is given by a softmax function, which converts the path values to choice probabilities while also allowing for decision noise. For every bridge on the path, the model would calculate what the shortest detour is when the bridge would be closed. So here the detour is depicted in white, and it would be only 2 bridges long. And the model does this for every single bridge on the path, so let's consider a scenario where this red bridge would be closed. Then the detour would be 6 bridges long. And the model repeats this for every bridge on the path, so it allows the agent to identify bottlenecks, which are bridges that would cause a longer detour when they're closed. We can then calculate the cost of taking a detour if bridge J were closed, which is simply the difference between the effective length of the detour and the effective length of the primary path. So in this left example, the cost of the detour is 2, and on the right example, the cost of the detour is 6. We can now define a value function for sampling bridge J, which is the expected value of the detour cost. This takes into account all the paths that run through bridge J and their detour cost. We tested different versions of this model, including versions with and without different heuristics. Please see the paper for a complete overview of the different model versions that we tested. But for now, I will only talk about the winning model. So this model included a near avatar bonus, which accounts for the fact that some people prefer to sample closer to the sheep avatar. And here D is the distance from bridge J to the sheep avatar location, weighted by a free parameter. This means that bridges that are further away from the sheep will be valued less when lambda is higher than 0. We then used a softmax function to convert the values to choice probabilities, while also allowing for decision noise. This means that bridges on paths with a shorter effective length and a longer potential detour are more likely to be sampled. Finally, the agent can stop sampling earlier, of course before spending all their 10 samples, and stopping here becomes more likely as the highest value of sampling a bridge approaches a stopping threshold, which is a free parameter in the softmax function. We found that the computational model actually fitted human behavior reasonably well. It outperformed a random strategy, and it also outperformed a model in which the agent samples based on graph theoretical features. This suggests that people indeed use the cost of switching to contingency plans to guide their sampling decisions. And this figure shows the model fit. So on the y-axis we see the probability of choosing a bridge, and on the x-axis we see the different graph theoretical features. The black line is the human choice data, and the error bars are the standard error of the mean, and the shaded areas are the standard error of the mean of the fitted model predictions. This figure shows that the model fits qualitatively well and similar to an approximation of the optimal solution. Next, we were also interested in individual differences in sampling strategies. We used Ward's hierarchical clustering method on the Euclidean distance between parameter estimates in a 6D parameter space. With this method, we identified 3 distinct sampling strategies. The least prevalent strategy was sparse sampling near the goal, and the 2 most prevalent strategies were sampling from the avatar towards the goal on the shortest path, and sampling from the goal towards the avatar on the shortest path. So in our puzzles, sampling from the goal towards the avatar is usually a better strategy because it can usually save the agent from having to take a longer detour. The other 2 strategies, sampling near the avatar or sampling from the avatar towards the goal, might actually reflect more myopic strategies. We also found a modest negative correlation between the scores on the future orientation scale and the near avatar bonus. This shows that people who are less future oriented in their daily lives also sampled more myopically on the task. So there were no significant correlations between impulsive choices in daily life and the task. So in conclusion, we found that people use the cost of switching to a contingency plan as a guiding principle for information sampling. This is consistent with the intuition that information sampling is often instrumental to planning, and that planning requires thinking ahead about future states. This finding also challenges past studies which establish that people rarely consider a longer time horizon for sequential information sampling and instead sample myopically. One possible explanation for such a discrepancy is that our puzzles were actually designed to include varying costs of switching to contingency plans, such that some bridges would cause a much longer detour when they were closed compared to other bridges. However, we also found individual differences, and that suggests that some individuals might be more biased to sample myopically, which suggests that myopic sampling strategies might actually be more trait-like. So finally, our study connects the planning and the sampling literature by showing that information sampling and planning are closely tied together, and that people do consider their future states when they sample information for the purpose of planning. I'd like to thank my collaborators Ili Ma and Todd Gurekis, and if you'd like to try out our task, you can find a demo version on my website. The link is posted here. And also don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions or if you would like to discuss this work in more depth. You can reach me at this email address. Thank you so much for listening.